Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. Of course, we're long as we reach towards the end game. The big question is now going to be builds. What is a strong and effective way to approach the big challenges in the new game plus stuff? Well, we have an insanely strong build here that can constantly stun opponents, especially human opponents, thanks to the massive spirit damage, which causes a critical punish every 3 or even 2 martial art uses. It's all enhanced with debuffs and lightning damage, which becomes insane if anyone's weak to that, and benefits from things like lifesteal, which allows us to simply deal damage and recover health as we fight. The armor even gives us plus 10% damage to everything while full health, and considering the lifesteal, we can constantly recover our health back to full as we fight. The core of the build is a popular weapon that we've enhanced with this build to maximize self buffs and enemy debuffs, all while crushing spirit and landing a lot of fatal strikes because of that. I should also say a quick thank you today to Josh for letting me record on his save, which is how I'm able to get this footage for this video, and why my character as well, his. Here's how it works either way. It appears to be the case in Wo Long that breaking spirit and landing a critical strike is one of, if not the, best way to win a fight. So this build kind of optimizes that process by providing you with a very strong, unique martial art that deals incredible spirit damage. Further, we can enhance both ourselves, the weapon, our equipment, all to maximize that output. The gameplay loop when all of this is going though is to barrage the opponent with that martial attack whenever possible, and punish with a buffed up critical strike for the fatal strike whenever we break that spirit. To get going, we will pop on some self buffs and a weapon buff and send out an offensive wizardry which will not only debuff the enemy in 1, 2, but 3 ways, then go ham on them with the martial art, countering criticals or basics whenever needed. If we do get hit, we can lifesteal ourselves back to full, or rely on normal healing when necessary, and break the spirit and punish with a hyper powerful critical strike whenever we can. Thanks to our wizardry, the set bonuses, our skills on weapons and armor, it all works really well and hits very hard. And when you're dealing with a humanoid specifically, for some reason you're just breaking the spirit much quicker, which leads to more fatal strikes and a more in control situation. Even in 1v2 scenarios, it is entirely possible to win with this build. And I swear, man, multiple target boss fights, it's not necessarily Wo Long's strongest point, pitting you against multiple opponents in a way that isn't exactly fair. Having a really strong build like this that crushes humanoids, well, that's really good. Now, as I mentioned, this weapon that allows this specific martial art is a popular and pretty well known one in the community right now. You may have seen different builds around this, but what we've done is make important updates and improvements to make the most of this weapon and playstyle. Things like the armor set, the set bonuses you can get from that, the protection offered there, the spirit manage and output from that, the buffs and self buffs, the wizardry options and the timing of them. That's what we put together. So I'm very confident in the build, but it's time that I actually explain what's going on here and what we're running. First up, the weapon, which I thought was going to be Guiding Blade, but it's like Gooding Blade. This is the all-popular weapon I was speaking of, thanks to its unique martial art, Thunderous Impact, which has you charge forward, dealing multiple small hits with very high spirit damage, and then a sort of final strike. However, most of the time, what you want to be doing is doing light attacks and then interrupting those with a Thunderous Impact martial art as soon as possible. As you can see for skills though, we have damage amplification on the enemy, making them take more damage with the martial arts, and we've made it so the martial arts spirit consumption and damage is better, costing less and dealing more damage. Then in our other melee weapon slot, we have the curve-headed glaive. This is essentially just a stick that will be on your back that you won't actively use. The reason we want it is to have a second weapon equipped, giving us the benefits of its stats, but in this weapon's case, it is part of a set. It has the unflinching bravery effect when you're wearing multiple pieces of this set. So the weapon helps get that set active and stronger. That set is unflinching bravery, which will reduce the damage we receive just flat out by nearly 2%. It will also help us with guarding, but the much more important thing is how it applies power gain whenever we use a martial art. So when we're spamming that really powerful single martial art over and over, we're actually increasing the damage we deal to enemies flat out by having this set bonus active. Further, when in perfect condition, when we're full health, our spirit damage will be increased, like I said, so maintaining full health whenever we're attacking is going to be ideal. The rest of the unflinching bravery set is on our armor, which as you can see is the Dauntless Tiger Servant set. This has some really nice defenses to consider, as well as it being that all-important unflinching bravery as part of its set. As you can see for the skills though, what we have is martial art spirit damage increased, shock accumulation on enemies increased, and lightning attack power increased. For obvious reasons, we want our martial art spirit to be better in its damage, and we are using lightning, so those two things are enhanced. Lastly, on the helm though, you do have a special skill to put on. In this case, we have damage amplification. amplification, specifically for wizardry. So whenever we hit the enemy with a wizardry, they're going to now take more damage. The wizardry we choose for this has incredible synergy with that concept, which we'll talk about in a minute. For the other three pieces though, we have the same thing: martial arts spirit damage improvements, shock and lightning improvements, and then that fourth slot is used up by wizardry spell spirit consumption reduction. So every time we use wizardry, it costs us less spirit overall, as we have one of these skills, and we have three because we have them on all three pieces. That nets us nearly 6% reduction, which is really nice. And as part of this gameplay and build is to basically maintain your buffs as much as possible and maintain the enemy buffs using, again, wizardry. We will be using a lot of it to maintain these things, making that cheaper. That's really important. I should also mention the ranged weapons. Basically, you're equipping any ranged weapon of convenience or use to you that has skills that are associated with what we talked about, anything that benefits the build. Finally, our accessories. Here is where things aren't going to be easy to suggest for you. You just need a general guideline. What I have on are just two that increase the general output of this build. So the first one has damage dealt and spirit gain increases. Of course, as we are using lots of spirit damage, that's great, and just improving our overall damage is just universally good. If you can maybe reduce how much spirit costs on wizardry or your martial arts, that's also a great option. Now we move on to the virtues of the build. 30 wood virtue gives us a nice amount of health to actually be, sustainable and functional in endgame fights. This also increases spell duration, and that is really important because we are buffing ourselves up, and we want those buffs to last as long as possible, as well as debuffs on enemies. Improving the spell duration then is going to help us with that a lot, and mean we have to spend less spirit on buffing up repeatedly because they last a bit longer. Of course, we're going to want some fire virtue as we are using martial arts. We want to make those cheaper, as well as slightly improving the spirit gain rate that we have. Now with the armor we have, we want to make sure that we have a proportion under 100%. This means we need 14 earth virtue to be able to actually counter and not be fat rolling, so it's vital we have this. Next is the metal virtue, where you can see we've got the most points just dumped into, as close to 99 as possible. This actually scales the damage we are dealing with our weapon because it scales at an A+ rating with metal. It also scales at a good rating of A- with fire, but since we're using a lot of wizardry in this build, it's actually better for us to go for the metal instead. It makes our wizardry spells much cheaper. It's down to 63.9%, and that allows us to get our buffs up and maintain them through the fight without it being overly expensive, as I mentioned. So metal virtue actually scales our weapon's damage the best and makes that cheaper to do, so it's awesome. Water doesn't really have any relevance for us, so that's why we leave it at 1. For our divine beast, we are using Teng Shi, which is just a top tier pick. It's basically for the passive though, 10% spirit damage to negative effective enemies. So say our lightning proc or our wizardry debuff. That provides a third debuff when we actually hit with these wizardries. So it's pretty incredible as a passive, but whenever we have it, we just activate it as a self buff. Last but not least then, we have our wizardry picks. Firstly, amplified damage. This one means we deal more damage, but we take more damage. This is one that I like to time at certain points in the fight, maybe at the start of the fight to get me going, or when the enemy is vulnerable, just pop it on to make sure my fatal hit is going to deal even more damage and the follow-up hits at that. Since we are running lifesteal in this build, we can get away with amplifying damage because it is very strong. Now, as I mentioned, we picked a synergizing offensive wizardry that is incredible. Life Wither, when you hit someone with it, will make them take more damage for a period of time. Because of his skill on our helm, offensive wizardry will also debuff enemies, making them take more damage for a time. And our divine beast, again, same effect, makes them take more damage for a time when you do something like this. So it's 3 debuffs, making them take way more damage every time you hit them with a Life Wither, and the debuffs last a good while. Maintain that before doing any burst or any attacks, or throughout the whole fight if you can, and you're going to be doing so much damage, so this is incredible synergy. Next is obvious, the lightning weapon. That is our weapon buff of our choice. Since we're buffing up lightning damage, this is obviously what we want to have on as much as possible. Lastly, absorb vitality. That is the lifesteal effect that I've been talking about. Simply maintain this buff throughout the fight, and every time you deal damage, you'll get health back. And since with the martial art, you'll hit many times in quick succession, you'll be applying, say, lots of lightning damage, and you'll be healing tons every hit. With these 4, obviously you're going to be using a lot of wizardry, and so that's why we use our virtues and other things as part of the build to help that be as cheap and effective as possible. Now I should explain, where do you actually get the weapons and armor? Well, for the Gooding Blade, we'll need Sun Jian at max companionship. When you reach that with him, he basically just gives you his set and his weapon. You can see it at any, say, battle flag under the deliverables menu that'll light up, and you get the rewards associated with that companion. For the armor and glaive, it's much the same, but with the hand Han Dang companion. A max companionship with him, that's when you get that stuff. Han Dang's a bit awkward to unlock though. You need to beat the side mission, the Tiger's Loyal Subjects. That requires you to have first beaten Darkness over Hanshu River, a main mission, and the side quest that comes from that, like Father Like Son. Then you can do the Tiger's Loyal Subjects, which is by no means an easy side quest. It's a 1v3, but it's well worth it for the rewards. But again, I do think multiple target boss fights are very unforgiving in Wo Long. This combat really works incredibly in a 1v1. In 1v2, it's a bit messy and a bit hard to organize. 1v3, this is just, it's pretty horrible. A lot of people hate that side quest. But again, the rewards are well worth it, and it forms this build, and once it's done, it's done. But in conclusion then, we have a really powerful build, very versatile, and incredibly strong against humanoid enemies where you're just going to crush their spirit so quickly. But again, it works super well against your demons and otherwise, and I've certainly enjoyed using it. This scimitar moveset, I really like it. If you have found this build video useful, then do drop a like on it. We'll be dropping more builds and other suggestions on Wo Long in the coming days. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.